Hello, and welcome to my genetics podcast. In this episode, we will be talking about how humans have made our mark on the animals we share the planet with, from selective breeding to genetic engineering. Plus, we speak with Nils-Hennes Stear, an ethics professor at Auburn University, to get a bit of his perspective on the ethical challenges we face when venturing into biotechnology. From driving species to extinction, to selectively breeding pets and farm animals, to new technologies such as genetic engineering and cloning, it is impossible to ignore the impact humans are having on life on the planet today. And it's not just a modern phenomenon. It goes back thousands and thousands of years. Humans have been selectively breeding animals since 12,000 BC. If you happen to hear a whimpering or growling or barking while I'm recording this, it's no big deal, it's just my genetically modified gray wolf. Early humans and gray wolves had a mutually beneficial relationship, and due to this, the gray wolves' bodies began changing along with their behavior, and over so many years, many of us now have our own genetically modified gray wolves. This might not be what you think of when you hear the words genetically modified. You might think of all the things we have now like CRISPR and cloning and all these other things, but that's just what it is. Once you have humans choosing which animals will breed with others, they have effectively chosen what the offspring will look more like. I called my dog a genetically modified wolf, and that's what she is. There's just a very small amount of DNA that makes her act and look vastly different to her non-modified counterpart. If I told you that I had a scientist friend that had this idea to create this new kind of dog, and it's going to be a really chunky, really hefty dog, and it's going to have a super thick neck. Its neck is going to be so thick that it won't be able to be born naturally. And it's going to have all these wrinkling folds of skin around its face, with a really cute face and a flattened nose, but it probably will have horrible breathing conditions, and you might have to have surgery to keep the dog alive. If I told someone that a scientist was going to make this, they would freak out and say, "Oh, that's a bad idea, don't do that." But what I just described is an English bulldog. So what we as a species have done is created this dog through selective breeding, and it's a beautiful dog personality-wise, but it's hugely flawed in its physical characteristics. And we have bred these characteristics for aesthetic reasons, purely for us. These characteristics don't help the dog out. These dogs couldn't even survive in the wild. They barely can even survive in our houses when we're looking out for them. We have used this genetic modification in the form of selective breeding for good in terms of all the domestic animals we have created for various reasons. But on the other hand, we have created this animal welfare blind spot where we are kind of prepared to overlook some of the suffering that we have caused the animals we have altered because it suits our purpose. It's a whole mixed bag. Focusing on the genetic modification that gives humans benefits at the expense of animals, I spoke with Nils-Hennes Stear about modern broiler chickens and pigs, of which the chickens grow so fast their legs cannot hold the weight of them after about 4 weeks, and the pigs grow so fast that their hearts cannot support more than a walk, and even that is uncomfortable.
So that kind of genetic engineering in the broad sense that has been going on for millennia seems to be the kind that these animals definitely have an interest in not undergoing or not being subject to, or not being the product of, if we're being a bit more careful. And the same point goes for more sophisticated kinds of genetic modification that would be made possible by new technologies like the CRISPR means of kind of micromanaging genetic information.
On a similar note, another example is a type of chicken that scientists have created in a lab that has been modified to not have feathers. This chicken, if allowed to be farmed, would be greatly beneficial to chicken farms, decreasing costs of upkeep, defeathering, and cleaning costs. The detriment of the chicken comes in the form of temperature control, among other things. They wouldn't be as prepared for colder weather, sunburns would be a problem, and mosquitoes and parasites wouldn't be hindered by the feathers as usual. This is like earlier examples, but in my opinion it is scarier because of how quickly the change can occur, contrasted by thousands of years.
The thing you point out, the danger you point out, is exactly right, that with this technology comes the potential to enact an enormous amount of harm on non-human animals, and the trend, looking at our past treatment of animals and our present treatment of animals, looks pretty bleak. for them. But there is great potential here, as elsewhere, to benefit animals too. So putting aside slightly more abstract worries about meddling with genetic material in general, there seems to be great potential to, for instance, reverse some of the harms that have been brought about by modern agriculture and artificial selection, such that, for instance, broiler hens wouldn't be so heavy that they couldn't stand on their legs. But if you have this technology embedded in a system that is largely oriented around profit making rather than one that places the welfare of animals center stage, then the potential for harm is really quite enormous, and I take it is already being realized. So genetic modification is like any other technology, and here I'm not going to say anything that people haven't heard before, but almost any technology can be wielded for the benefit of human beings and non-human animals and the environment, etc., or to its detriment. And this kind of technology and these kind of techniques are no different in that respect.
We as a species have an enormous amount of power placed in our hands, and the planet is relying on us to make the right decisions with that power. I am confident with the right amount of empathy and a bit of compromise, we can leave the planet in a state that is better, or at least not worse, than before we started playing with those gray wolves so many years ago.